What is up, Poke Peeps and Masters? It is Russ here, PokeRuss here, and we are back for our last day of this road to Gencon, on the road to Gencon series. We had 3 deck profiles before this, and now we're going to go over a little bit of an in-depth thing about side decking. So side decking is probably one of the most complicated parts of deck building. Personally, I don't know if I'm great at it. I don't know if anybody is great at it, but it all comes down to meta call and how you're able and willing to adapt. Super important in a best of 3 format, especially when going to something like a regionals like we're talking about with Gencon and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go over pretty much like a side deck. This is like a theory craft video and like what you want to think about when you're thinking about building a side deck. So side deck, if you haven't played much before, is a 15 card thing that goes outside of your deck. And in a best of 3 in games 2 and 3, you can swap your deck out into these. You have to keep the same remaining cards in your side deck and in your regular deck, but this gives you a 15 card window to kind of play around with what you're doing. So this is kind of like more of a beginner's guide to side decking. So we're going to take a deck here. We're going to take a basic. We kind of did the profile for this on the channel the other day, but we're going to take the basic Hirudegarn deck and kind of go over this. If you haven't watched the deck profile video, I would suggest you go back and look at it. I do have a playlist down in the description box down below for the Road to Gencon series. Again, it's been 3 deck profiles, and this kind of just like leading up to Gencon and the first like big Bandai regionals, all that hype. I don't know, but let's go over the basic deck combos. Are obviously you have your little weenie guys, your intensive power fighting trunks. You combo it with flute, unyielding trunks. One of the best super combos in the game to just keep putting pressure on your opponent. It's not about stats. Obviously, there's a little bit of stats in there, but it's more about putting that amount of pressure on your opponent where they have to keep wasting, just chipping them down using 1-2 cards at a time and just chipping them down and just doing all that kind of stuff. So you use, between Hirudegarn's effect and Hoi's effect, you can use the Hirudegarn pieces and do all that kind of stuff to just keep chipping away at your opponent, keep adding cards to your hand while they're losing cards and just creating an advantage that way. Just keep putting the pressure on. So this deck, obviously there's modifications to this deck, there's better versions. This was just kind of a basic version we did because it's a really good deck, and you're going to be seeing this hugely, maybe not this exact version, but you're going to be seeing it hugely at regionals and leading up to regionals if you're playing any of the ARG state championships in the past week or anything. But so because this is a common style deck, obviously people can side against it and do that kind of stuff. So some of the weaknesses of the Hirudegarn deck are it's weak to if you can, it has a little bit of trouble with like combo killer Z, the turn 4 guy, turn 4 green guy. It has a little bit of trouble against apes. At least the standard version does, stuff like that. And just like there's a couple matchups where it just doesn't have the best matchups. If an ape deck can go turn 1 Bardock into Iron Will Bardock with like a Super Saiyan 3 variant, that's a 2000 blocker that's just sitting there in the face. Now, I mean, with a flute combo, if you can like flute and like do things more than once, the blocker doesn't matter as much. But it's still, the sooner they get more and more Bardocks on field and apes and just big fatties, the harder your matchup gets. And then like the combo killer, you have your Bergamos. You have your Bergamos saying, hey, you can't attack the leader, you have to attack me first, and he just keeps getting fatter. You have the combo killers every time when you combo, not every time, but when you combo, you have to discard cards from hand. So it's whittling away at those very important aspects that the deck is known for getting with like this setup. So it kind of mitigates the pressure, which kind of puts the deck at a little bit of a turn. So there's different ideas for side decking. There's a couple different ways you can side deck. What you can either side deck for your hard matchups, which understanding your hard matchups is a part of the game and stuff like that. If you play at locals or anything like that, you understand some of your hard matchups. If you watch some videos online like mine or Danny Hypes or any DBS tuber, like you'll hear these things like, hey, this deck struggles with this, hey, this deck struggles with this, stuff like that, because they will talk about it. They are honest. They might not give you the full honest deck, but they are they're being honest about the matchups and all that kind of stuff, because they want you to learn just as much as them. So like you'll learn over time what your deck is strong against, weak against, stuff like that. So like I told you before, some of the weaknesses of this deck. So some of the ways to mitigate, the one way you can side deck against is to mitigate some of these issues, and maybe make some of the changes to make those matchups better. So say you think this deck, you're taking this deck to regional because it has like a 60-40 against like, or it's a 60-40 against the matchups you think you're gonna face. You're good against this deck, the Y deck, Z deck, but you struggle. You beat 4 of the decks in the meta, but you struggle against like 2. So you side deck to kind of make your matchups a bit better in those 2. That way your main deck is good against the 4, your side deck helps you against the 2, you're kind of well-rounding and trying to get the best matchups for the day, obviously. So, with some of the ideas, you can either go into the curve or you can go against the curve. Going against the curve, I don't actually have an example for this, I'm only going to go over this quickly, but sometimes you have 15 cards in sideboard, which is huge. You can kind of change the entire strategy of your deck in those 15 cards usually. I don't have an example for Harudigan, so this was kind of a bad thing for this, but I didn't feel like making an entire deck just to show you the differences. But, like, say your opponent sideboards in, like, Mass Saiyan against you. I do have, like, Mass Saiyan does give this deck some problems, because obviously you've got a bunch of weenies on the board. Mass Saiyan come in, they're comboing, so they're going to have the cards in discard pile. They drop Mass Saiyan, just pretty much wipe your entire board. You set all that stuff back, and for 1 card, instead of them having to, like, summon cards, attack over them, control the board a little bit, they just drop this, boom, field gone. Done. Dunzo funzo. So, like, sometimes you might want to switch the deck around so it doesn't do the exact same thing. So when your opponent does sideboard in, because game 2 they're going to side as well, they're going to sideboard in their Mass Saiyans, they're going to sideboard in their blockers, stuff like that. You kind of just, you change the strategy of your deck so you don't have the same weakness. They're thinking you're going to do this thing, and you're doing a completely other thing. That's going to throw them for a loop. So if you, like, winning game 1 in that scenario is super huge. That's the only time that kind of sideboard gets away with, is when you have game 1 on lockdown, you call the meta correctly, you have game 1 on lockdown, you switch out your deck first, game 2, you surprise them again, and they just don't know how to handle. It's adaptability. So, just like in fighting games. So that's a way you could do it, but when you do that, watch out. This is a very risky strategy. One, you have to be super know your deck that well, and you have to know the matchups, and like you can't switch out your deck to something like, say I wanted to switch this out to veggies. Like, say I want to do Harudigan veggies for some reason. And veggies still have the same weakness of Mass Saiyan, and apes to some extent. So, like, it's not a good idea to switch into the exact kind of same strategy. Even though it's a different realm of possibilities, it still has the same weaknesses, so when your opponent's sides are still going to have the strength there. So even though you have a surprise, they have the counter still. So it's not the best there. So that's a risky way. This is what I think the better way of finding your weaknesses and trying to overcome those weaknesses. So some of the weaknesses of the deck, like I told you, were like the big fat apes, the combo killers, the Bergamos, stuff like that. How do you play around those? For apes and combo killers and Bergamos, realistically, one of the best sideboards you can do for this deck is Chain Attack Zeno, because 1, you're running the same colors, and 2, you can go into it actually really quickly if you play this, evolve into this, and just, so say your opponent, turn 1, Super Saiyan 3 goes Bardock Ape, you play out your turn, you do what you need to do, they go super, like, they have 2 Bardock Apes on field right then and there. You're just like, how do I get around this? Turn 2, as early as turn 2, if you draw into the stuff, you can go Zeno Trunks. They have eaten, they're awakened now, so they only have 4 life left. You're pretty much ahead, assumably. And, they've got a massive hand with the Bardock, all the Bardock stuff going to hand, maybe the Guine effects or the Videl effects, and all that kind of stuff, and they're in this position where they're just walling you. Use Zeno Attack Trunks, they lose their Bardock, so they lose 2 out of 4 of their Bardocks, assumably, to the discard pile, so it's harder for them to evolve. Those guys turn into basically turn 4s. And because they still have 2 Bardocks in deck, but they're risky to use them because they have to take the life from them. And stuff like that. So you just reset their board. It's really hard for them to come back there. The Bergamos, it obviously bounces everything back so it mitigates their effect. Combo killers, it resets you for the turn and just kind of, they're kind of, getting turn 4, they're playing a risky game where they got a combo and do all that kind of stuff just to live to turn 4 and stuff like that. So it's just, like, this resetting the board is huge. Huge. Any deck that creates a large hand advantage, you just reset the board. Even if you have to combo, say you can't bring this out till like turn 3 or something, say you have to, it's okay if you see this coming and you're able to do this, it's okay to combo out a little bit just to protect yourself, so you can go Zeno Trunks. You're back up to 5, they're down to 5, and you just kind of go from there. So that's a one-way or a nice card you can use for sideboard. Obviously, if you're facing the mirror match, you always have Mass Saiyan, or you can have Mass Saiyan just to blow up one guy. Another card you could side in for that kind of same thing is Dimensional Fu. Again, you just have to watch out for barrier when it comes to this stuff. I'm putting this right behind my head. So Dimensional Fu and Mass Saiyan kind of do the same thing. If you're worried about like a bunch of weenies, you usually play Mass Saiyan. If you're like, but he doesn't get rid of blocker, so you play Dimensional Fu and just gets rid of anything. They're both 5/1 Overwhelm, and this deck creates Overwhelm super easy. So this is another board you can sideboard in, because most of these Harudengen decks probably main Scientist Fu, so you switch Scientist Fu out for the Dimensional Fu, and you just kind of have the destruction you need to kind of counter around with these things, because it happens. More cards you could look into if you're facing a very defensive deck that likes to play topos and all that kind of stuff. You have the Dimensional Fus for the stuff that you can obviously just destroy, or the Mass Saiyan for the stuff you can destroy right in front of you. But if for like the end push of the game, like say you're all set up, you're ready to go for the turn, and you know they're kind of sitting on some topos, like you've seen the deck game 1, you know they're sitting on some topos or any counter play cards. You can even tech in a minus kill zone. I don't know if this card's good enough to be in main deck because of the amount of counter plays in play, but if you see your opponent siding in boarding into more topos because you're going awaken super quickly, their topos are live quicker, minus kill zone. It says send 3 cards from the top of your deck to the warp, which also feeds these guys, which is super nice. And counterplay, your opponent cannot activate counterplays for the duration of the turn. So that kind of kills that strategy if you see it coming. Obviously, you can still combo out with those topos, but it's less of an impact. Again, if for the mirror match, if you're playing the mirror match and you're kind of going to go aggro without having to combo out and control the board, because that's not what the deck's supposed to do. Obviously, Goten, Son of Justice is a nice sideboard card. And this card's been sideboarded since set 1. It's obviously a good thing. Another card I forgot to add to my stack of things, and obviously we're not adding one of each of these cards. We're adding more copies. These are all just options of ideas, like you knowing your weakness, knowing your strength, to go in, and you're comboing anyway, especially in the Trunks variant. This card's very good in the Trunks variant, because you're comboing, he gets the benefit of you drawing for the comboing, and you're killing one of the cards, you're attacking their life, you're still being aggro, you're doing everything you need to do to be awesome. Seeing both, and even in the Trunks variant, if you're seeing this, actually, I didn't even think about this till now, because you're already playing Unwavering Trunks. You're probably not going to want to give up the 2 mana for it, but in this variant, you could actually sideboard in Mighty Mask. So you can actually just grab these 2 to combat certain things, but it's really hard giving up 2 mana. You do have the mana on Awakening with this, but you don't have it on this combo. So that's another potential sideboard for us, that kind of style of deck, potentially. But this is really good on offense. It doesn't really do anything on defense, which is kind of a hindering part. This meta, it's really hard to put cards in deck that have less value on both players' turns. So, like, Planet Vegeta actually has less usability than it used to, just in the fact of, with how aggro the format is, like, having that 1 card in hand is just like, I can't combo with this, it's kind of dead. Even though I'm like wanting to play it on my opponent's turn, it's really hard. I'm not 100% sure if I'd suggest it for the Harudengen deck, but for the Super Saiyan 3 variant, I would definitely suggest Mokuba. Mokuba, you are giving up 2 mana to be able to play this, but if you think your opponent is set up to do their combo shenanigans, Mokuba can stop it right out of the gate. So the thing about Mokuba is, like, if you think that's pretty much all they're going to be doing with their turn, like if you think they're stacked, like they got the Trunks, the Flutes, the Toas, blah blah blah, they're just gonna pretty much reuse that Trunks like 5 times, turn that Trunks into nothing. They can't Flute it back, they can't Toa it into active mode, they can't attack with it anymore. Like, that Trunks is basically useless. They've only taken 1 life off of it. Like, they're not awakening. Like, Mokuba can be risky, yet very integral part of your sideboard. Again, it's really risky being 2 mana, but I think the Super Saiyan 3 variant can use it a bit better, or if you have untapped yourself with like Senzu Beans, or what's it called on your opponent's turn, unyielding on your opponent's, or on your turn. So Mokuba's a good strat. So another weakness of the deck is the low cost, so it's weak against some of those things that kill a bunch of low cost creatures, like Mass Saiyan or Goten. So you think your opponent's going to sideboard these in. So you can change your curve a little bit, not getting rid of your initial strategy, because the cool thing about Flute is, and again, many people use Flute on themselves, but it's also good against your opponent. You can bounce back their turn 3 blockers, their Yashirobis, or stuff like that. So that card's not a dead card in the deck, but if you want to change your curve up a little bit, kind of drop your turn 1s, still have the aggro mentality, but change it into a mid-range aggro. You can switch out to more of a variant that runs things like Dragon Fist, Kaba, Jiren, and even your own Topos. So giving it a mid-range vibe really does kind of, depending on the matchup, like I said, it all depends upon a matchup. Obviously, you wouldn't want to switch into this against aggro versus aggro matchup, but against that mid-range style, like they're holding you off and then controlling you, and that's when they're punching you in the face. This kind of, you have the Topos to negate some of the stuff. So you have your special summon Cyber Dragons. You have your Pride of Justice Topos to kind of mitigate them, and then especially against like combo killers, you have Jiren. Again, you have this against kind of like the combo killers slash. Well, Jiren just gets really fat really quickly, so he can also potentially be an answer to the Bergamos if you've gotten rid of their blockers or something like that. And then also Super Saiyan 3 Goku is super nice. One, it's barrier, so it's protecting itself. Double Strike is turn 6, which kind of hinders, but again, if you're able to curve into that mid-range, you can play it. You choose one of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, so that hits that combo killer right in the face. Combo killer does have barrier. I don't remember. I think it does. 90% sure it does. I don't know. 80, 50, not sure. Anyway, there's other barrier cards that are a pain in the butt, like strategist, stuff like that. You ignore it, return it to the owner's hand, and then choose up to 2 of your energy and switch into active mode. So even if you keep some of this strat in your hand, but you up the curve just a little bit on some of your other cards, if you're able to hit this off, get rid of the thing that's stopping you, and then go hamsies, like, again, it's not going to be available and useful in every matchup, but that's what the sideboard's for. It's for those matchups you either struggle with, or this might even be the change style you've changed your deck to make it a different style. It might be. And then last but not least, potentially, I'm not the biggest fan of this card, at least in this format, because again, it is an extra card that's dead if you're needing a combo, but you can always use M2. M2 can be used against useful against Bergamos. It can be useful against any of those mid-range decks where they're pretty much planning on, like, they have cards in hand, they're obviously already bigger statted, so they don't have to combo as much, and it's harder for you to chip away. M2 kind of just gives you that relief where you pretty much have a free combo every turn by paying that 1 mana right at the beginning of the game. You're set up, you have you drop them by 5,000, and you kind of just force them to use one more card. It kind of turns the aggro match back into your favor a little bit. But, and it's also, you're also dropping them by 5,000 without using a combo card, like a combo power. So that way you're kind of effectively hurting the combo killer a little bit and stuff like that. But I think these are, obviously you choose some of these. There's obviously different, there's more sideboard options that you can use and stuff like that, but I think this is just a taste of all the different options you can use in different decks. Again, these aren't just useful for 30-gun decks. They could be useful for Trunks decks, they could be useful for any of the blue or even yellow. Like, again, some of these are just universally good. Yashirobe's another one that I didn't add to this because I didn't think to grab it real quick, but like, there's just universally good sideboards. There's Krona, there's obviously all these other things, but the sideboards, honestly, come at the end of the day, this is what you're thinking. This isn't just for regionals, but for locals as well. If you do best of 3s, you gotta tailor to what you think the meta call that you're thinking. So watching YouTubers and doing all that kind of stuff is really good. Also, the meta is also changing as we post these videos and all that kind of stuff, so keep an eye on that as well. You don't want to be like, oh man, super worried about this deck. PokeRussPlays posted it 5 weeks ago, but it seems really scary to my deck. It might not even be relevant now. 5 weeks is a huge amount of time, especially this year in Dragon Ball, but examples. So I hope you enjoyed this series, the Road to Gen Con series. If you guys would like to see more series like this, more Dragon Ball TCG content on the channel, let me know in the comment section down below, and let me know if you like this kind of content, more option ideas instead. I don't know what to call it. It's not obviously not deck tech, but it's like this is basic card game. I don't know. So let me know if you like this kind of stuff in the comment section down below. Regional starts tomorrow by the time you're seeing this. For me, it's a couple days, but it's starting tomorrow for us. So wish me luck in regionals. Don't forget to hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, stuff like that. I'm probably gonna have like live feed how I'm doing round per round. Potentially, there's 2 regionals, so let me know if you're interested in that. And I'll probably have a video next week about how everything went. So like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Have a great day. Bye, guys.